So, with regards to Wrath of the Titans, um, yeah, before I go on to more generic terms, I'd like to point out this one thing at the 38th minute mark, where what's he called? Agenor it says I'd like to give him an eyeful while he was hanging from a tree. Um, now that's peculiar because I don't know how many people will link it to Norse mythology, but it is essentially, unless they didn't intend it, but they probably did. It's very well, relatable to Norse mythology specifically. Not so much Greek mythology, I think, but yeah, Odin in Norse mythology did the same and literally sacrificed an eye to gain wisdom. So that's a sort of crossover thing there. But generally, I am not sure why it's been so negatively received. I mean, alright, it's not exactly the most profound story, but the CGI sort of compensate. I mean, CGI is impressive, one could say, really. And I mean, everything, it's not much different from. I mean, it's obviously a fictional story, but there are many Greek mythological stories, so I'm not exactly sure. I mean, it's not much different from them. Um, Now, I have actually seen this first as opposed to the original. Apparently, this is a sequel, clearly, but it didn't seem like. I mean, there was nothing within it that made me think that I'm missing something. So I don't think it's strict. It doesn't depend so much about on the prior incarnation. But yeah. Um, and generally, so I'm kind of familiar with Greek mythology, so I don't quite need an introduction to most characters, at least. And I wasn't aware this story is actually quite old, or at least the original is old. I'm not sure if there was an old movie based on Wrath of the Titans, but an older Clash of the Titans, apparently much older, and because apparently characters were based on some person called Beverly Cross, and another weird bit of trivia is that he seemed to write quite diversely, and I happen to have watched in the past um, a musical written by him, apparently, Half a Sixpence. I'm not sure if I commented on it. Nothing to do with this, obviously. Um, yeah, based on an H.G. Wells novel, so technically not his, but yeah. Um, so quite diverse, I suppose. I don't know if I think the British are sort of like yeah. I mean, yeah, they are playwrights, I suppose, but I think in the film world they're called screenwriters, right? I don't think they write screenplays. I don't think, yeah. Anyway, yeah. So it's interesting, and the original movie of Clash of the Titans. So not this one, but the original, which I still have yet to watch. The original though is from 1991, so quite old, and apparently, um, yeah, stop motion visual effects are used. So stop motion is obviously slightly different from CGI. I think it's sort of like Wallace and Gromit, isn't it? It's stop motion, I think. So yeah, slightly different. I'm thinking it would be sort of similar to. I've once watched an old Jason and the Argonauts adaptation, and the what was it called again? The big bronzy thing. Yeah, I don't quite remember very well. Um, he was kind of shaky. He didn't quite move very seamlessly, but of course they just did what they could back then before CGI became advanced as it is. And I think that's stop motion. So I think that was stop motion, which I'm assuming is sort of like playing with a doll and then playing with dimensions and such, with perspectives to make it seem like it's huge, etc. And obviously, I think removing the strings or such. I think that's particularly it. So yeah, quite an old adaptation. I had no idea Clash of Titans was sold. I had no idea it was based on apparently a former husband of Maggie Smith, who has been dead now for 22 years. Maggie Smith, of course, keeps going. She always keeps going. And yeah, this one had Bill Nye in it, which I've certainly liked better than um, Shaun of the Dead, which I've also commented on. I mean, just I don't know why people like movies where somebody just keeps on bleeding endlessly. I mean, I don't know, I don't though. I certainly don't find such a specific scene certainly funny. But anyway, that's for Shaun of the Dead, which I've also commented on, so I'm not going to go there for now. But I've certainly preferred Bill Nye in Red of the Titans. He was funny. I mean, he was sort of funny in Shaun of the Dead as well, but not in that specific scene. So that specific scene, so then sort of cancels out everything else. This is the problem with some movies, they kind of sort of act against, but whatever. I guess some people like it. Um, Here I thought Bill Nye, yeah, was pretty funny up until the end. Yeah, it was certainly funny, and there wasn't any scene that really cancels it. It was funny up to the end. Well, okay, maybe not, totally funny up to the very, very end. At the end, then he was just trying to be heroic or whatnot, but it doesn't cancel the comedy prior. Certainly, it's brilliant. When he said, um, do I know what was it called again? Does he really exist? Genor. Do I know Agenor? No. Is he important? No. And actually, yeah, I hadn't heard of him, so I know sort of the surface of Greek mythology, but no, Agenor apparently was a Phoenician king, so they did adopt some things, from certainly he wasn't. Yeah, it doesn't seem like he was really the son of Poseidon. They just presumably that was presumably completely fictional. Yeah, seems like it. And even mythologically, it seemed like he was. No. So, yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Hmm. Although he was theoretically linked to Zeus somehow, mother of the Sidon. Yeah. Although, wait a second. Well, Poseidon is mentioned here, but not quite. Yeah, supposedly he was, yeah, actually. I've missed this. I'm not sure how I missed it. Well, no, supposedly he was. And Libya? Never heard of Libya, but okay. King of Egypt. Right. Daughter. This King of... Hmm, I see. I'm not sure how I missed that. But anyway, yeah, that scene was brilliant, though. He was pretty funny. Yeah. He was probably one of the funniest, apart from Aguinaldo himself, probably funnier, though. I mean, he had less screen time. Aguinaldo himself was kind of funny, though, yeah. Funnily enough, so I've watched the actor for Agenor also in just yesterday. In fact, I think. Um, but I didn't recognize him at all, at all. I had to say that he also plays what was he called again? Yeah, this it's a completely different movie, but he plays, yeah, John Quaid in Rock and Roll. Completely different movie. That was a set. I certainly prefer this movie instead. Yeah, I had never heard of him before yesterday though, so I'm not quite familiar at all with him. But yeah, I mean, these kind of movies really, I mean, they're like, I mean, they could have a good story. They could really. In fact, it would be better if they had a good story. Um, but otherwise, I think the CGI was very interesting, very cool to look at, which is why I end up taking tons of gifs because this CGI is just worth it. The problem I have with such movies is that they inevitably end up depicting, like, alright, they use CGI for the Titans, well, at least the least they could do, and the Cyclops and the Minotaurs and the Chimeras, obviously, which is completely fictional, non-humanoid, but they don't use CGI at all, it seems, for the gods themselves. I don't know why that is. The gods should be differentiated as well. The gods aren't supposed to look like not normal humans, which they do. You know, um, I played the Master of Olympus Zeus strategy game, and there the gods are, at the very least, depicted as much more massive than humans. Clearly, very much more massive. So clear differentiation from the start, but also uh, very different in terms of the lights that they emit, the colors. They all have some sort of glow about them. So like Aries is associated with red, etc. They should have done this. I mean, there's no difference between Aries and anyone else really, and Perseus is. That's one problem I had with how the movie looks. Really, it's kind of a problem, especially now in the age of CGI. They could do a much better job with that if only they did. Because just what's the point? I mean, is this some sort of thing where the people think, oh yeah, gods were totally human? Yeah, humans are totally gods. Yeah, really, really? No, it just cheapens it. It's mythology. The gods aren't supposed to be human, so just make them appear more. I mean, I can't reconcile Zeus with the actor. Frankly, I'm not saying that he didn't act well, although most of the time he just had to stand there and just appear to be trapped and etc. But I mean, another problem I had actually with his specific performance and the script behind him is that he acted as if he was Jesus or something, right? I'm not sure if I think he might have played Jesus. I haven't seen it, but I think he might have Liam Neeson, right? And in my mind, he's not Zeus, though. But then I don't know. He played so many characters at this point. It's a bit difficult to differentiate. And the last time I've seen him was in A Million Ways to Die in the West, which was a terrible movie. So in a sense, I mean, this is a better movie, but it's kind of difficult to differentiate in terms of what he's trying to play. I mean, he plays a villain there. Here he plays well, an over the top positive Zeus. I mean, Zeus wasn't so clean cut. It's not like the original Greek mythology tried to hide that. He kidnapped others, etc. He wasn't a Jesus type of figure. Why did they make him like that? So yeah, it's not a perfect movie, but I don't know if this is the main complaint critics and people generally had. So when I say it's a good movie, it's only because of the CGI. I mean, the CGI is impressive. Other than that, though, characterization has problems, as just mentioned, and I don't know why they did this. Honestly, I don't know. Um, yeah. So yeah, he did. His very first role actually was Jesus, apparently, in a movie about Pilgrim's Progress, which is actually, yeah, I described this uh, tale as old as Pilgrim's Progress is around 400 years old. So, this is the problem I have with this. I mean, if only they put some CGI on the gods, it would be better. I wouldn't mind even if they were just all CGI. I mean, probably would cost much more, yeah, and it was already 150 million. What is also strange about this is that it doesn't seem like it was financial failure. It seems to have made profit to the tune of double its budget, and yet they seem to respond to the critics by not releasing Revenge of the Titans, which was supposed to be planned for the year after, but they had too few ideas anyway, so no idea. No idea how we could have few ideas when the Greek mythology is so full of them, unless they really wanted to be entirely fictional and separate. Um, Revenge of the Titans could have been pretty cool as well. I, well, I'm obviously going to watch Clash of the Titans as well at some point. I don't know if it's going to be disappointment now in comparison to this. Um, that's another thing. So I mean, this says the title of it, the prequel. Um, Titans is plural, right? And yet, in this one at least, I don't know about Clash of the Titans. There's only one Titan, so it's a bit of a misnomer. Yeah, I've known Kronos for a long time. Somewhat confusing, can be confused with Cronus with CH, who is the god of time, but they're not the same creature. And this Kronos is the one depicted by Goya in one of his most gruesome paintings. Um, yeah, I think it was Goya at least. So a bit of trivia about some people that made this movie. Sometimes I do talk about this, but often not. It's sort of interesting and yet not at the same time because it's more personal trivia, I suppose. But well, it's still objective trivia, but very much trivia. So I'm talking about the likes of well, I mean usually I talk about actors, the movies etc. But I don't know. Suppose other staff members and what other movies they made could also be possibly interesting. So the music. Now the music is more crucial usually. I couldn't figure this out. Obviously, I've only just read it. Yeah, the musician Javier Navarrete also collaborates with Guillermo del Toro, and he also composed for The Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth, both of which I've seen in the past. I certainly much prefer Pan's Labyrinth. It was generally well received, but yeah, and from what I remember, the music is pretty good. I don't think the music. I mean, music here with Rat of the Titans didn't seem to stand out too much, so I don't know. Maybe it's just the fact that CGI was much more all-encompassing, I suppose. So I think in Pan's Labyrinth there's only CGI for the creature that the girl encounters. Other than that, no. The music is actually very depressing in Pan's Labyrinth. That's yeah, I suppose maybe that's why it stands out. I don't quite remember the music in Devil's Backbone either, so maybe yeah, sometimes you only stand out in a single movie. But yeah, Pan's Labyrinth very depressing. Yeah. Cinematography, on the other hand, apparently he's mostly involved. Ben Davis is mostly involved in DC Comics movies, which I haven't got into yet because there's so many and I just haven't gone into them yet. But I've seen, and I'm not sure if it's is it DC? I've seen Kick-Ass a decade ago when it first came out. It's Marvel, right? Marvel. I cannot quite differentiate them really. I haven't gotten too much into them. I did like Kick-Ass too. Mike Strong certainly has a fearsome presence there, as opposed to Motorola, even though he's supposed to be a similar sort of character, but doesn't really. Uh, anyway, um, yeah. So Kick-Ass I've watched the same from the editor. I mean cinematographer. Editor on the other hand, Martin Walsh. Apparently, he also dabbles as a cinematographer, and I've watched Chicago, which he cinematographed for. Is it the verb? I don't know. He actually won the Oscar for it. Hmm, interesting. Alright, so that's pretty much it for these. Other than that, suppose there's the stories, the screenplays. There's quite a lot. There's characters, there's stories, and screenplays. It's quite a lot of translations, if you could call it that, I suppose. So originally, you get characters from an old story, and you write the story itself, a modern story per se. But then why do they also need to write a? I mean, okay, a screenplay is usually more technical than a story, but I don't get why they need to write a story, and why can't they just go straight to the screenplay if they want to write something? Anyway, yeah. I don't think I've seen anything from the person who wrote the story at any rate. No, don't think I have. Specifically myself, if you have answers, so don't think I've seen anything like by the screenplay writers either. No. When it comes to producers, I mean, it's even more vague, isn't it? Producers just fund the movies, so they don't. I don't know if they usually have a say in what happens there, but yeah. At any rate, I haven't seen anything by them either. With regards to the director himself, I have once, long ago, when it first came out, seen Battle Los Angeles, which apparently was the movie that directly preceded Red Hat Titans, and that's pretty much it. So I've only seen a couple of his, and apparently he has a history in horror movies. So I suppose yeah, it's sort of had just tiny bits of that here with the Minotaur, etc. Mostly with the Minotaur, and maybe a bit with the Cyclops. But when it comes to Battle Los Angeles, so I really don't remember liking it at all. And yet, I read here that it was not number one when it first came out. Is how many tickets were sold. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that. Well, it means what it means, I guess. I just don't remember having a good impression at all of it. I've only seen it once though, so who knows? Maybe variables and everything. I, you know, that didn't think it was much different from Transformers or so, apart from at least Transformers has somewhat interesting characters as opposed to just metal CGI that is soulless, practically. Hmm. By the way, what's a bit confusing is the fact that the Minotaur was encountered in the labyrinth, which of course it originally is in, but the thing is, in the original Greek mythology, the Minotaur was defeated by Theseus, not Perseus. So I'm not entirely sure why they did that. They just that's a bit of a change. I mean, obviously this is all fiction ultimately, but yeah. So just but it is a bit different, isn't it? It's one of these things. I don't know if just now people but also I don't think I've ever heard of the labyrinth as being connected to Tartarus. Yeah, I search for any connection. I don't find any either. So that's a bit of a misconception as well. I've never heard of Crete being connected to Tartarus or Hades generally. Another thing that I think they could have used, although it would have obviously cost more in CGI, but it would have been so much better, I think. Because they had the Cyclops, they had the Minotaur, but both of them are a bit similar. You know, they're humanoid with one has one eye and the other has horns, etc. Quite similar though, and they're both sort of not exactly pretty to look at. You know, I mean, I'm not expecting monsters to look pretty, but I mean, I don't know, Chimera was at least slightly more interesting to look at. I'm just saying, whereas the Minotaur had drool, etc. Anyway, Cerberus. Cerberus is the one creature they just forgot. It would have been awesome if they had Cerberus, which is obviously Hades' dog. This is the problem with this. I mean, they used CGI a lot, but actually, they could have used it a bit more. Funnily enough, I mean, obviously, they of course more as I say, but they didn't use it for much, for the gods themselves. So might as well used it. They could have used it then for at least, in this case, like Cerberus, at least they used it on Pegasus, yes. Although I don't think I've ever seen a black Pegasus, but anyway, yeah. But that's pretty much it. I don't think there were much more. Was obviously the Kronos himself was pretty cool. Sure enough, I suppose that's the coolest sort of CGI in the movie. Sure enough, but he doesn't come until the end, of course, like in the last 20 minutes, I think. So not too much. I mean, sure, still has more screen time than most other creatures that were built using CGI, but it's still not that much. Considering the fact that the whole, I mean, okay, ultimately he is sort of the final boss, etc. But they still didn't use a lot of CGI in the rest of the movie, and the otherwise still besides the CGI, it was fairly common, sort of like like any almost like Risen, Risen, a movie which I've also commented on. It's the other side of mythology, also known as religion, you know, uh, as in it's about Christianity as opposed to Greek mythology. But anyway, it's the human style specifically reminded me of that. I mean, it is, I suppose you could say, set around the same time, so in that sense, it's sort of accurate because Greek mythology is supposed to be timeless, etc. But they do look somewhat like, I mean, he literally wanted to be a fisherman, etc. And there's lots of fishermen there in those times, and then the movie Risen itself. Um, Obviously, Risen doesn't have as much CGI, although it does have a bit. Um, but in this sense, it's fairly commonplace to look at, apart from, I'm not saying, that, usually, movies that just have that aren't interesting. I mean, Gladiator has a lot of sort of commonplace and inverted commas scenes, with humans, just humans, not much CGI, and if there is, it's subtle. I think in Gladiator they use CGI for the lions, if I remember correctly. But it's still an awesome movie, obviously. But it's mostly awesome because of the story, of course, the characterization, etc. Whereas with this one, it's weak, right? Obviously. So the more CGI they use, the better it is. But they still didn't actually use as much CGI as they could have, as I suggested. I mean, whatever they used, it still ended up to 150 million. So was already a lot, and it could have been ultimately another what was that again? The Heart of the Sea, I think it was called Heart of the Ocean or something, which I've also commented on. Which I think, if I remember correctly, was quite expensive, and it didn't even recuperate its budget. Heart of the Sea, yeah. And yes, yeah, it was slightly less in budget, 100 million, still 100 million, which is a lot, and it made in box office even less, 93 million. Although, sure enough, the subject matter is slightly cruder in a sense. I mean, what would one rather watch? Whales being harpooned or a fight with a primordial titan? Yeah, I think I know what I'd rather watch. This is the problem, but I'm just saying though. I mean, I like the CGI. I usually generally like CGI. Like I even like Transformers, but it doesn't really have a incredibly interesting story generally, and it's even more fictional. So you cannot just compare and contrast with mythology or legends or such or real life. Obviously, if there's a connection with real life, there are some connections with real life here. I mean, there are some characters that, that blur the focus, between like Agenor himself, supposedly is a son of Poseidon, but he was also supposed to be a Phoenician king of Tyre. So, and supposed to have lived before the year 2000 BC, apparently, 2000 years ago. Now, whether he lived or not, no one is sure, and whether he was really a son of Poseidon is even more obscure. In which case, Poseidon would have needed to be a real human. When it comes though to other things with regards to accuracy, it's a bit mixed. So, for example, right? Well, I mean, another famous adaptation of Greek mythology is obviously, well, Hercules essentially overall is more famous than Perseus. Perseus happens to be an ancestor of Hercules. They're related, but in terms of which adaptation is the most famous, I suppose. I mean, yeah, there's a long-running live-action series, but there's also obviously Disney's Hercules, where Titans are supposed to be featured as well. Now, they're not exactly, they're more like elemental representations, really, rather than Titans. But then again, this one was as well, sort of. Kronos did look like a volcano come to life, like a transformer volcano, I guess one could say. Which I don't think the original was quite like that. That's what Disney also did in a way. There was also, yes, a volcano, but there was also a huge hurricane thing or tornado, and a block of ice, which one can fight in Kingdom Hearts, of course. Brilliant fight. Was there someone else? I forgot. Anyway, With regards though to accuracy to the original mythology, of course. I mean, whether mythology itself is accurate, they're just legends anyway. Yeah, with regards to that, obviously there's a lot of differences here. I think there are more differences in this movie than there are in Disney's Hercules, possibly. Like, maybe minor differences, though, in a way. Like, Io, originally in the mythology being the mother of Helios, who, by the way, I actually confused a bit with the other Helios, which where the helium is derived from, which I think has something to do with. I think is a god of sun or such. I think, but no, this was a prince of some sort. Yeah, but he was indeed the son of Perseus, legendarily at least. But his mythological mother was really Io, not Andromeda. So I'm not sure why they made such differences, but anyway, possibly something to do with the original movie, which I haven't seen yet. So yeah, when it comes though to other things, like Hephaestus, saying that he forged the weapons and such, and who he forged them with, the Cyclops. That is accurate, and that wasn't mentioned in Disney's Hercules. What's also a difference? I mean, what's also a difference, yeah, in terms of well, it's not much really, but in Disney there was only one Cyclops, kind of like it's one eye, whereas in this one there were three, and indeed in the original mythology there were three. So, by all means, this movie is more accurate on that front, not so much on the other fronts, but anyway, one of those things. Um, so in that sense, yeah, the Cyclops is, yeah. As I said, the Minotaur isn't so much, so in that sense, but isn't in the sense of, yeah. I don't think the Minotaur is quite, would have been better, as I say, if Perseus fought, I mean, if he's going to the underworld, of all things, yeah. Um, should have really fought Cerberus, not the Minotaur. I mean, by all means, if they want to make him a villain as well on the way, yeah, sure. But more prominently in the real mythology, Cerberus is, and how cool would Cerberus look in CGI? I'm not sure if I ever saw him in CGI. He is in Kingdom Hearts, but there is, well, I suppose it is in a way CGI, but it's not quite the same CGI that movies used to see. I'm not sure. It's not sort of metallic; it's more animation. Uh, he is in Disney's Hercules, so on that front it's more accurate. There is a Cerberus in I think it's called Hades, but Tartarus is I think is it like a specific part of Hades, I think. And sometimes I confuse Tartarus with Tantalus, which is they sound very similar, but no, Tantalus is someone imprisoned within Hades. I don't think he's imprisoned in. But then that's the thing; it's a bit confusing. So Tartarus, I think, is also where the souls go, but also where the Titans are imprisoned. So I don't know if human souls have conversations with Titans. Be kind of cool, huh? Imagine that you die and suddenly come face to face with imprisoned Titans. Wow. Hello, Kronos. Do you still have an appetite for your children? Oh, you don't? Oh, yeah, you do. Oh, never mind, never mind. Anyway, yeah. So, hmm. But, yeah, I've read a summary of, critics' opinions, etc., and some people's. I still do not get what the fuss is about. I mean, sure, it doesn't have the greatest characterization, but but the reception of movies is a certain well, either random or stupid act, possibly. Of course, ultimately it's subjective, so it's not stupid as it doesn't have any connotation. I mean, beyond the fact that there might not be a sequel. There's no consequences per se. I mean, people either make a profit or don't. But it's really random ultimately. It seems to me. You know, like for example, in terms of like rom-coms, many rom-coms aren't really successful, but then you get one like a big fat Greek wedding, yeah, it's not really terribly different from most other rom-coms. Uh, Maybe slightly above average, but not incredibly above average, and yet its reception was unbelievably more positive than most other rom-coms, so ultimately everything's random, so it seems to me. But in terms of if one compares it to others, generally like with like, I suppose it's kind of useless to compare this with rom-coms. I mean, it tries to put in some sort of tiny bits of romance. Obviously it fails there. This by no means is a romantic movie at all, by no means. But I don't think it tries too much anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, like with like, though, in terms of like, there's this sort of thing where there's a lot of chaos. I mean, yeah, some critics say it's chaotic. Well, yeah, I guess if a titan unleashes his wrath, then I'm assuming it won't be like a tea party, or as in a cup of tea, having tea with a titan. I don't think that works. Might have worked in Toy Story as a sort of play sort of thing, doesn't quite work with it. Anyway, you know what I mean? I'm not entirely sure why critics would criticize this for its chaos. Like, it's a whole point. On the other hand, movies like, the fact that I mean, I'm even comparing it to uh, the Fallen series, is terrible, I think. I mean, there are honestly the worst movies I've ever seen, the worst franchise I've ever seen. And yet, guess what? Guess what? There are three of them. Wow. The worst movies ever, and there's three. I mean, I'm not saying this Titans franchise is the best thing ever either. But honestly, what is the major difference between it and others like, it's also similar to Lord of the Rings. Now, sure, it has, better characterization possibly, and better plot, and it is in its own right fictional, though entirely fictional. I'm just saying, they're fairly similar. I mean, they both use CGI, fairly similar. Trees talk there, and instead here you get um, well, all the giants talk in some other language. But anyway, then again, you could say the same thing about Noah, which I've also commented on. In that movie, instead, you get rocks that talk for some reason, and it was also so badly received. I don't get it. I'm not saying these are as good as Lord of the Rings, but as movies, what is the major difference? I mean, they all use CGI. Now, where the story goes is different, but in comparison, the Fallen series has absolutely no story, and it's the most ridiculous, brainless thing ever. And guess what? The average rating is more than this. I mean, does this really deserve 5 point something? It's not that I gave it a 10 or anything. I gave it, a 6 in this case. But you know, in comparison, I mean, I'm just saying, in comparison to other average ratings. There's no way any one of the Fallen series, uh, just not there's no way in any way. I mean, it also uses a lot of CGI for some reason. In my opinion, completely wasted. Apparently, they couldn't use the real Washington DC, so they created it. But I mean, sure, it's not like I could say they did a terrible job with that, because I gotta admit it fooled me. But I mean, it doesn't have a story. It's brainless, so I completely wasted really as CGI go. goes, and anyway, to even compare to that is absolutely hopeless. It's honestly the worst movies I've ever seen, and if I ever encounter anything worse, I'd be surprised. But somehow people, the average rater seems to think the Wrath of the Titans is worse. Like seriously, um, it really is not. But whatever. Um, yeah, whatever. I mean, this is the weird thing, though. It's completely random. Okay, as I said, you get Lord of the Rings, which is also rated much higher. It's all of them are some of the highest rate. So what is it though? Is it the story that people are rating? Is CGI? Because CGI is fairly similar. The story, sure, is different. I mean, every movie has a different story anyway. So I don't get it. Even the original, yeah, not the absolute original Clash of the Titans, but the 2010 version is also rated lonely. I haven't seen it, so I can't. But, not likely it's very similar. I don't get this though. I mean, I don't personally, generally rate CGI movies very highly, 6, 7 maybe. My opinion of Transformers isn't very high either. But when it comes to this specifically, though, because Transformers is more about machines, clearly tries to depict machines as opposed to organic beings. But yeah, as I said, I'm not entirely sure what the difference is between talking rocks in Noah and talking trees in Lord of the Rings. The CGI is similar. There's nothing to complain about with regards to CGI specifically. Story then, sure, every movie has a different story. I don't know. I don't know if the people are rating stories. I personally rate everything as well, so it's not like I don't do the same. But sometimes I really cannot figure out what people rate exactly. I mean, there's so many movies on the top 25 list that it's ridiculous. That some I have no clue as to why. I've commented about some in other reviews. I have no idea why some are so highly rated. Then I mean, I'm not saying this is a masterpiece or anything. Just I mean, even Prince of Persia here, which is also something I saw also, isn't rated very highly, but it's rated at least about nearly one more, 6.6. So around the same. Yeah. Personally, I think I've enjoyed them both about equally. But this is the thing. I mean, what's the difference between Prince of Persia, Sands of Time, specifically I'm looking at here, and this bizarre. Um. Anyway, yeah. By the way, with regards to um the original, the 2010 version specifically, though, yeah, apparently it has a video game. So in a way, it's a good thing I didn't watch it first because I'd like to play it and don't quite have this system all set up to play it. So need to set that up, and this one doesn't have a video game though. So maybe I'd watch the very original, the 70s or 80s is it version as a sort of replacement, and then watch the 2010 version later, maybe. Um, but yeah, another theory as to why they're rated as they are, maybe, is the original theory, shall we say? You know, um, like how Psycho, the original, is rated so much highly, and the sequels aren't for some reason, even though they were like. I always comment about it, and so that might be another reason, because somehow there's people who've seen the original Clash of the Titans and prefer it to transfer. You know, even though it probably has jerky stop motion movements. Generally, stop motion I think is jerky, which is why it's not quite used a lot these days. I think it's not anyway. I'm not entirely sure actually if it can not a bit jerky, but generally I think it is. And somehow it's not listed in the more like this section, because of course people just, yeah, this is the thing. So if it's not listed, then is it really the reason? Can it really be the reason why these are so lowly rated? Anyway, the original, in comparison, the 1981 version is indeed rated higher by less people, so 41,000 as opposed to, it's rated nearly 7, 6.9 right now. So yeah, it's rated so the, the 2010 version has um more than quarter of a million raters, so it's quite much more. I don't get it. Is it maybe people following the, just following the lead? Like some people at the beginning didn't like it, and so anyway, I have no idea. Yeah, personally, just like with Noah as well, I liked it for what it is. Really, I mean, what was people's major complaint about Noah? Oh, there weren't talking rocks in the original. Like, yeah, and I mean, if they made it from just strictly from the original, it'd be very boring. Yeah, one of those things. I actually much prefer deviations, even just I do prefer something different. Always better. But yeah, ultimately, I've no idea why these are rated so lonely. I've always noticed them. 5 point something. It's ridiculous. I rate five. It's not that I personally haven't rated it much more, but in comparison to some of the movies I've seen, utterly ridiculous. Anyway, I think I've gone on for long enough at this point. So yeah, it's really a slightly above average movie in my opinion. I haven't seen the original, so I cannot compare it directly. But it's um, really same as Noah. I consider to be slightly above average. Not spectacular, but slightly above average. You know, unlike Transformers, which I consider to be mediocre at best. But by all means, people seem to love them based on the fact that they're Brazilian. I don't know, maybe people love the mediocre, I guess. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's not, I mean, much better than mediocre, but it, I liked it. I liked it for what it is. But then again, I like most mythological sort of inspired by mythology, movies and such. So maybe that's what it is. But I think the CGI is pretty cool as well, generally. Yeah.